To me, I really feel like basketball accelerated my personal development in ways a few experiences can. I always say like, basketball was life before life, right? It kind of compressed like decades of life lessons into a few years. Basketball was my first classroom in a sense. I kind of built a career doing that before I even stepped into the corporate America. So a lot of these lessons that I face during that 10 years I face now. So you learn how to handle pressure, failure, relationships, accountability, discipline, leadership. A lot of these things you experience just in the game that eventually you experience in your corporate career as well.
Welcome to the table. You're tuned into the Academic Boardroom with Dr. J and Dr. E. Pull up a chair. Higher learning, higher stakes.
Welcome back to the Academic Boardroom, where we sit down with power brokers shaping the future of education. I'm your host, Dr. Eli Joseph, and joining me is my colleague and partner in crime, Dr. Janice Gassam Asare. Today, we have a special guest by the name of Ishaq Pitt. Ishaq is a senior manager at Deloitte and a former Division I student athlete who spent his years translating elite athletic discipline into high-stakes corporate strategy. An expert in leadership, team dynamics, and analytical execution, Ishaq is a former two-time captain and floor general for the University of Maryland Eastern Shore Hawks men's basketball program. His academic and athletic excellence have earned him various prestigious national awards, and his current focus is now on driving operational excellence and building high-performing corporate teams. Ishaq, welcome to the boardroom.
Yes, thank you guys for having me this year with me. I'm very honored.
Hi, Ishaq. So I'm really curious about your academic journey and your upbringing. I know you and Dr. E were talking, and you both were, raised in Brooklyn. Um, what what has your academic journey been like? What did you study in school? What really interested you? And yeah, how did you get to where you are today?
That's definitely a long path, but kind of going from the beginning. I actually was born in Toronto, Canada, T-Dot where Drake is from, and then I grew up in Brooklyn. I kind of migrated here, very young age. So there's some elementary school and junior high and whatnot, all the way through the tri-state area. Moved around a lot, different schools. And had to become one that was adaptable and just be able to meet people and be able to kind of translate wherever I was, different personalities I was encountering. So went to a few different high schools as well, and then ended up at Maryland Eastern Shore. And when I went there, I went on the Division I basketball scholarship, right? And my whole career, I was just kind of just focusing on playing basketball and getting better. I never really sat down and thought about what would I do if basketball never worked. And this is probably the point in my life where I really had to kind of sit down and say, hey, what do I want to study? What do I want to do if basketball doesn't work? And always like money, always like kind of the business stuff. So I was like, hey, let me try business, right? And regardless, I felt like whatever you do in life, there's some type of business aspect to it. Even on this podcast, I feel like there's finance that kind of goes into it. And I was like, hey, big Jay-Z fan. I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. So, that kind of really brought me to focus on business. And then, the business is a large umbrella, multiple different disciplines, finance, accounting, marketing, and whatnot. And I used to follow Warren Buffett. A lot of maybe young people might not know, but he's probably the greatest investor of all time. And used to like listen to a lot of his stuff, read his books. And one of the things he said was accounting is a language of business. So you have to understand accounting, the language, to kind of be able to deal in business. So I grew up, low income household, struggle. We lived in shelters at times and stuff like that. We didn't have money. My dad was an aspiring singer. My mom was aspiring actress. So we never kind of really had that business in my family. At least I grew up around. I really had that example to kind of see. So I was kind of going and starting the journey kind of by myself. So I was like, hey, regardless of what I end up doing, I need to understand the language. I need to understand accounting. So that's kind of, got me to kind of do accounting. And I went to one of my professors at the time and was like, hey, I'm between finance and accounting. And he said, you can always get a finance job with an accounting degree, but you can't get a accounting job with a finance degree because of either 150 or whatnot at that time. So that kind of led me down to, focusing on accounting and kind of just paused there.
So you're good with numbers, or have you always kind of liked numbers or had an affinity for numbers?
I've always enjoyed math, right? Math has always kind of come easier to me. Just kind of the structure with it, and it's always right or wrong. English was like, I felt there's always someone's opinion, right? So it was like, I've always kind of more so moved toward the math type of stuff, and I had to pick electives and stuff like that.
I was going to ask about the dynamic of being a student and an athlete. Because at the time, this is before we had NIL and before,
Yeah.
yeah, before we had the
Yeah.
corporate side of everything. I was wondering, how were you able to navigate through, your classes and then becoming that student, that's that athlete that in for general at Maryland Eastern Shore?
Yeah. So I just want to be fair, I guess, for whoever might listen to this. Like, I wasn't a great academic person growing up, right? Like, I was like, basketball was going to get me. I never even wrote, um, like an essay or apply for a college. I was like, hey, wherever basketball's going to open the doors, that's where I'm going to go. And I kind of knew I have two older brothers, one played Division One as well, that like I needed a minimum of 1,000 on my SATs to kind of be able to go to any college because of the sliding scale. So I was like, yeah, I'm smart enough to get 1,000. I always felt like I'm not there, but I was always probably like a B, maybe C, got a couple of A's in high school. So I was all over the place. I just never really applied myself because I was really more so just focused on enjoying life and basketball really didn't want academic. I did enough to keep my like that off my back, honestly. Like did a bare minimum. Um, I was blessed because I started jumping to different schools, but I went to a school in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. It's, very affluent area where, a lot of people who are doing financially well. I was around and some of them kind of got to me and also HGV, it was in Homedale, both of them. Some of the parents was kind of like, hey, Ishaq, like you always depend on basketball. It might run out. If you could do well in school, that could really change your life. He said, look at how we're living. They're living well, mansions, or what I thought was a mansion at the time. And they're like, we never play sports. So if you apply yourself, you get your grades up, you do well, we can help you. And I was like, oh, really? Right. And that's the first time kind of me understanding the power of network was. So like I said, I was in Basking Ridge and SJV, these more fluent areas, just kind of with, people who had a lot more money than my family had at the times and had exposure to kind of that. And what I always said was, hey, when I went to college, I was going to focus. I was like, I'm gonna at least give it 4 years to try my hardest and see if I apply myself, what opportunities that will lead to. So that's what kind of let me, when I'm entering college, um, I did a prep year before college. When I got there, it was like, hey, let me really apply myself not only in the basketball court, but also in the academic court, on the academic side. So like, you think about basketball, you think about the discipline you need to have, or even sports in general, discipline, the structure and stuff like that. I used to wake up early in the morning, 6 a.m., go work out after two, lift through everything I need to do. I create a similar type of structure in college for my academics, right? What are your non-negotiables? You gotta go to class, you gotta make sure you're studying X amount of hours. Um, got to make sure you're out there meeting people and things like that. So if you really think about it, you only have 3 hours of class, probably a day. So I said, hey, I have probably 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep, practice for another 5, 6 hours, just other time. I want to be really, really intentional about what I did with it and kind of creating that structure and, the same daily habits that I had when basketball working on every day. I started applying that to the academic side. And, I was surprised myself. I was amazed. Like, first semester I had a 3.8, and after that, I don't even think I had another B for the rest of my, college tenure. So that's what kind of led to that.
So you feel like basketball taught you, even though it sounds like when you were in school, your focus was solely like basketball is going to be the pathway to
Definitely.
open a bunch of doors, but then you see the parallels. It sounds like you've been seeing a lot of parallels between basketball and business and seeing a lot of, like the skills you learned. What were some of the skills you learned in basketball that really helped you excel now in your career? working at such a, large consulting firm. Do you see a lot of those skills that you kind of honed in on when you were playing basketball are helping you now in your career?
Yeah, definitely, definitely want to kind of dive more into that. I think before going in there, I didn't see that opportunity until I left Brooklyn, until I was around people that showed me there was other options outside of basketball, Dr. Lloyd. That's usually generally what we hear about in the environments that I grew up with, right? And sometimes like that, I can't be a doctor. I can't do, who wants to do like 15 years of schooling after college, right? So sometimes it's discouraging, but seeing these people that have different careers and be able to do wealthy kind of said, hey, give me something to aspire to. Like to me, I really feel like basketball accelerated my personal development um, in ways a few experiences can. I always say like, basketball was life before life, right? You kind of compress like decades of life lessons into a few years. And it's honestly one of some most of formative times in your career, your adolescence, right? Where your brain's not fully developed. Basketball was my first classroom in a sense. I kind of built a career doing that before I even stepped into the corporate of America. I built a life to the game. So a lot of these lessons that I face during that 10 years kind of I face now, right? So you learn how to handle pressure, failure, relationships, accountability, discipline, leadership. A lot of these things you experience just in the game that eventually you experience in your corporate career as well, right? But you understand how to deal with that. You understand how to deal with difficult times. Imagine working on all the time, right? 24/7, kind of really putting your whole into it, and you have a bad game or things aren't going your way, you want to quit. But you learn, hey, you have to persevere, you have to wake up the next day and kind of do it again. It's not over. It's similar thing in my corporate career. I definitely had a lot of times where experienced hardships, I experienced failure. I was like, dang, I'm not even gonna bounce back from this. Like, dang, everybody's gonna fire me tomorrow. Like, but it allowed me to stay level headed. It allowed me to um be patient with myself, right? Understand that my worst decision, my worst play on the court is not who it doesn't identify who I am, and try to kind of seek an identity outside of that. So I think it really did teach me, a lot of different things. It really helped me really build a foundation to be successful off the court.
I was wondering, most
Mm.
student athletes, they tend to either go into coaching, they tend to become trainers, they tend to stay in the game. You chose a more different path, even for those who do not stay in the sport of basketball, whether it's a training or coaching. They tend to become sports agents. Did you have it in your basically in your path to say, you know what, I'm just gonna do what's natural to me and follow my path, or I'm just going to see if I can stay in the game of sports and become a sports agent, or do you feel as though your path in consulting is what was best for you at the time and what is best for you today?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So, um, if you really think about, probably 90% of my network was basketball driven. So all the opportunities I kind of knew about was what you just spoke about, agency coach and stuff. My brother was a coach at South Carolina State for years and stuff like that. He decided to stay in that field. I know many people that were coaches, many people that went overseas and played. And I always told my dad, even going into college, like, I don't want to go overseas. People were like, why? I was like, I have friends that did that. So a lot of times you don't know the language, you're isolated and stuff like that. I knew for me, that's not the type of life I would excel at or what I wanted to do. And then when you come back after that, you have to start all over, right? Not a lot of people don't make money overseas like that. There's a very few, portion of the population is actually making six figures and are actually doing better. And you can do well. Don't, I'm not saying you can do well, but majority of people, especially come from Florida Division One, a lot of people are not doing well. I have a teammate, Mike Myers, doing phenomenal, right? He's like overseas and killing it. He's a big, but it wasn't common for the people, at least that played at my level, low division one, to go overseas to play basketball. Similar with the coaches. My coach asked me if I wanted to coach, and I was like, no, like I can't put my career, my livelihood in a bunch of 18 to 25-year horny dudes and trust them to make the best decision for my family, right? So I understood that dilemma there. It was like, hey, I would love to get back and stay connected, but I had to figure out a time when that would make sense for me and how to do it. So I was really drained by the game. So I was like, hey, I don't want to do nothing with basketball. People were kind of disappointed in that decision. I was like, I wanted to kind of stay away and try something different. And I think what really kind of allowed me to believe in that was the network I had built outside of basketball, the people that I've seen do well, the financial advisors, the accountants, PE people, venture capitalists, the people that I seen were doing things outside of basketball and how well they were doing financially. Even some of those peers I had during this time, one so kind of gave me the confidence, like, hey, there is a world outside of basketball you can be kind of successful. And I was like, hey, let me step out and try that. So kind of going out, coming out of college, I was like, I'm going to do, I had internships at Deloitte, had some of the offers, opportunities at Goldman Sachs and stuff like that. But I was saying, I was kind of steadfast, like, hey, I want to move away from the athletic part and kind of really dive into this other side.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you said a lot of players in your particular at your particular level don't necessarily excel overseas, because it seems like that's like the alternative that's offered to people who don't end up playing here in the US. But it sounds like your upbringing is similar to mine. I moved around a lot, and it sounds like you got a lot of the skills that you get when you're moving around a lot as a kid growing up, right? It wasn't ideal for me, but I realize how adaptable it's made me. And I know that now in your career, that's one of the things that, you teach people how to do. I know that team dynamics is a big part of the work that you do. And so I think that it's interesting that your upbringing, it's kind of like a full circle. You said you moved around a lot. You went to different high schools. You mentioned being in Jersey and then in Brooklyn and being born in Toronto. So I think all of that really helped to shape you and to help you to become more adaptable. Because I know for me, you can put me in any environment and I can do well. But if you had just stayed in maybe Toronto or stayed in Brooklyn, never went to Maryland, I think that those skills wouldn't have been developed as much, maybe until you got older. So I do see that. But I'm curious, with the work that you do around team dynamics, where do you see the parallels as far as the basketball court, and navigating a team, and then now in corporations, like helping to navigate team dynamics? Because there's always these issues that come up where maybe there's conflict among team members. So how do you see some of the parallels from basketball in the corporate work that you do now?
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with you. I went to kind of quantify, I went to like 12 schools, including college, right? So like
Mhm.
one year I went to three different schools, elementary school, like it was lax. So you're kind of forced to adapt and, you know, actually every kid kind of wants to be liked. So build relationships, build friends and how to kind of prioritize that. I think when you kind of, it's a touchy subject, right? When you kind of trying to build teams, a lot of times people want people like them, right? We want to be around who we are comfortable being around. I think if you even look at the basketball, right? Simple game. You can't have five Steph Curry. You can't have five LeBron James. You need to have a shooter. You need to have people in space to penetrate their defense. Everyone has to have a role. And I think the best teams are able to kind of structure that where everyone has a role that complements each other. Different personalities. If you don't want anything to be disruptive, but kind of where people can kind of communicate well with each other, talk, try to find the best solution that is best for the client or whoever you're trying to find a solution for. And there's always going to be, not always, but there tends to be some times where people don't get along. And how are you able to communicate? How are you able to work with people that you don't like? In a basketball team, you're not going to probably like everybody, right? You might be cordial, you might not like everybody. It might be not everyone you hang out with outside. But on that court, we have to find a common goal, something that's bigger than us that we're trying to do. And how do we best work together? And I think it's a similar type of thing is where you try to find the personalities that can kind of work well together. I think you think about the technical stuff, like that's table stakes. Everybody has to have that, especially at this stage of my career. I think it's more kind of the other things, like exceptional communicators, like especially given this virtual type of environment where people usually more so on the phone and stuff like that. Can you communicate? Can you speak? Can client calls? Can you pick up the phone and understand? And when they're mad, can you calm them down? Right. One of the mentors one time told me like, Ishaq, you need to understand like this might not be the biggest moment for you, but the person that on the other side of that phone call, this might be the biggest moment of the month, of the year that they're dealing with, right? It might be a real fight for them. So you need to be able to be receptive to that and be able to communicate with that, have them feel that you understand how urgent it is for them. So communication, people that are problem solvers, right? I think we all know that we want people that can individually kind of work together and say, hey, let me figure this out instead of just asking, but try to take things on and do it. People that take ownership of the work. Me personally, I like people that kind of are calm, right, under pressure and stuff like that. Because a lot of times we get a lot of fire drills. You can't be running around, with your head on fire. And people generally, enjoy helping other people. I think the best way actually comes from this communication, talking things out, one person, apprenticeship style, teaching somebody else. So to me, those are like always some of the key traits that, I kind of look for.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, but then you kind of answered it as far as like what do you do when you have conflict on the team, whether it's on a basketball team or like on these corporate teams, because like you said, people have different personalities. Something I see, I do a lot of corporate work around like DEI. And one thing that I see is I'm sure on basketball team it's the same thing, but it's like that saying where there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Everybody wants to be like the LeBron James or the Steph Curry. And sometimes people don't know how to like take a back seat or they don't want to take a back
Mm.
seat. What do you
Yeah.
think in those instances where there's so many I guess you could say alpha personalities or so many people who want to get the credit, get the be in the spotlight on the team. But like you said, you need in order for a team to work, you need some people that are willing to maybe just assist or take a back seat. How do you it sounds like maybe communication is a huge part of that because I know you mentioned it, but are there any other strategies you lean on when you have those types of dynamics, whether on corporate teams or on the basketball teams that you've been part of?
Yeah. Um, One thing I learned just playing sports is that everybody's different. So the way that you might deal with one person is not going to be necessarily how you deal with another person, right? And you need to understand everybody's communication style, what's most effectively for them to receive it, not how you want to speak it. So I might speak to my big man differently than I might speak to my shooter. One might need more confidence, like, hey, you got to keep shooting. One might be like, yo, you're playing like trash, like step it up, right? But it's the way that they respond to it. So you need to spend enough time with these individuals to kind of understand how they respond. And similar with the corporate, right? Even I remember as a young senior at staff under me, and she was like, Ishak, like, I feel like you don't really know me, so it's hard for me to kind of work with you because you don't really know me, understand me. You haven't invested enough time in my personal life. And I've always felt like, oh, it's personal. I don't want to get into your personal, right? And I was like, okay, and I remind me, like, some people want that. So people that want that, I gotta invest that type of time in. So in regards to communication, I think it's kind of, depends on who that person is and what's most effective for them. In regards for like the alpha dog comment, I would say this: there's always an alpha overall, right? You got to understand your pecking order, right? Like I have a partner, regardless if what he says goes, he's taking the most risk. And you got to be humble enough to understand that even though someone might get it wrong, you got to be there and take that ride with them and support them. I mean, if it goes wrong, you don't be like, "Oh, I told you so." You're like, "Okay, let's pivot to something else," right? And you got to be a willing team player to understand that. And I think the people that kind of do well are people that can understand that. Hey, even though you might have had the right idea, you got to go with the team wants or whoever that person kind of has to own that decision is making, right? And then two, you also have to learn how to influence people. So can you articulate why your reason or your path is the best for the team? And a lot of these people are smart, right? A lot of people that everyone has an ego and pride, but a lot of them listen and they gotten so far in their career because they're so smart. So it's more so like if they hear something that makes sense to them, I think a lot of times you can persuade them or have them, incorporate that idea into the pathway.
I was wondering, when you when you were growing up, you were moving a lot, and being that you lived in Brooklyn for quite some time, I really appreciate that because I'm from Brooklyn myself. You
Shout
know,
out to Brooklyn.
I was wondering how important your confidence is when you're stepping into these rooms with Fortune 500, corporate executives,
Yeah,
and you're closing in deals. How
yeah,
important have you ever felt the level of imposter syndrome when you were in this
definitely.
room, or you
Yeah.
probably had this confidence like I belong here as well?
Yeah, no, I would say initially, right, coming out of college, like I didn't go to the best academic school, right? I went there because for athletics, like to play Division 1. It wasn't really for the academics. Joining this, big company, everyone's like, are you going to, company that you're joining? And you're like, say, what else came from XYZ school? You understand the prestige of academically of how well these schools are. And you're like, damn, am I good enough? Right? Like, am I good enough to really kind of be here and add value? And I would say, I was like, you know what? Line me up. I might not be good right on day one, but you give me a year, I'll be on par. You give me 3, I'll be past them because I'm willing to do the work. I have the discipline. I've been in a competitive environment my whole career. So I'll say maybe very early in my career I had it, but once like I line up against these people, right? I'm like, okay, I'm fine. I'll be fine here, right? And you kind of measure yourself, right? And I think that kind of helped me develop confidence. Like now, I don't think I walk into a room where I would say I'm not confident. So I understand what I can bring. I understand, the tools that I have, the experiences I have, and honestly, more of my experience are probably outside of this um the corporate worlds where just kind of being relatable to people, just understanding, being respectful and listening to people and understand those skills, and it's easier kind of for me to connect with people, and I don't have to bring an ego into that room. So imposter syndrome definitely had it, especially early in my career. Now I don't know if I have it as much. I think I'm pretty confident. I'm quiet, but I'm pretty confident in what skills I have, who I am. Now I understand that I can get it wrong. It's all right to be wrong. You just got to make up for it. And you just got to learn from it. I think that kind of allows me to into these rooms with confidence. Even if I don't really know nothing about the subject, I can ask intelligent enough questions, to kind of hopefully spark an idea.
I think that's a mark of a really great leader is somebody who's willing to be wrong because, a lot of leaders, whether it's on a sports team or within a corporation, in my experiences, leaders are so scared of being wrong because as a leader, people look to you for answers and people want you to be right, and so it's sometimes difficult to be humble enough to say, it's okay if sometimes I'm not always gonna get it right. But I was laughing as you were answering because I know um, the people that I know from Brooklyn are like their confidence is through the roof. So I was like, I'm sure confidence is not an issue because one thing about people from Brooklyn, they will tell you that they're from Brooklyn before you ask or but I feel like y'all's confidence is through the roof. So I'm sure that
Feel
Brooklyn
like you're taking
upbringing
a shot at Eli now.
it's like it's not a backhanded compliment. It's a great thing to have confidence because I I truly believe you belong in all the rooms you find yourself in and that, society and all these things have told us we don't. But I'm sure that you bring a very unique experience to, corporations versus somebody who, took a more traditional route, maybe went to a school that focused on business, studied business, came from that environment. They have one perspective and there's a lot of those types of people within consulting and within these large corporations. There's less people who have a more eclectic background like you. So I do think that that brings a great dynamic to a team. So I did wanna say that.
No, I appreciate that. No, thank you. Thank you for that.
I have a question here, and I'm obviously going to preface this by saying that, these are all your views as well. This is, views of your own.
Definitely on my
Yeah,
views.
yeah. But I was wondering, when it comes to going back to school, your future, in terms of how you think of where you see yourself in 5 years, do you ever think about going back to school for your master's or going back to school for another degree, or do you think you're fine where you're at in terms of like pursuing other
Yeah.
other ventures, or elevating up in terms of consulting?
Yeah. That's a great question, man. It's honestly a ton of debate that I have all the time is like the resume matters, right? What's on paper matters, especially in this world. They judge you, right? Until they get to know you. So if I have like an Ivy League, MBA or something like that, it definitely probably open more doors. There's a part of me that's like, hey, I want to say I did it without doing that. I did it my way, right? So it's like that's where my ego comes in. Probably that's probably where and probably need to be a little bit better. It's like, hey, do you want to spend a couple 100,000 on this degree? That's definitely going to open up your a network more, open up your network more, or do you want to kind of continue going against the grain and saying, hey, I'm doing all this, but this is all I have to it, right? And it's like you see people like Jay-Z's who's been able to kind of cross over and things like that. And I don't know if there's any right or wrong answer. I think most people try to tell you like, hey, the safe answer would be getting a degree. So I do think about it to be determined. Um, if it makes sense, I'll do it financially and stuff like that. But if not, I feel like I'll be fine regardless. I'll figure it out either way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It would obviously be like a resume builder, but there's so many people who accomplish really great things who don't have those on their resume. And I think me and Dr. E are great examples where um I feel like both of us went to like small colleges and like people don't I went to school in Virginia. I'm from Virginia. VCU, people don't know about it except when it comes to basketball. But if someone's not into basketball, they don't really know VCU. And then I went to like very small schools for my master's and my PhD, but we both have taught at Ivy Leagues and done all of these things. And, I don't think you necessarily need that to excel, but it feels good to, I'm sure if you decided to pursue a master's at, like Yale or somewhere, it would feel good to say, you have it, but I don't necessarily think you need that. But I'm curious, if you decide not to pursue more advanced degrees, how you continue to learn or what that looks like for you, because you seem like somebody that just from us talking to you, you enjoy learning and you enjoy growing. What does that look like for you? I know you mentioned you're a fan of Warren Buffett. Are you reading a lot of his books or listening to his audiobooks, or what are the ways you continue to like grow and stretch yourself?
Yeah, definitely want to get to that and that question, but before that, I kind of want to understand from you two, like, why haven't you guys decided to go get a degree or some type of certification from more prestigious schools, right? Especially in the academic world. I'd love to
That's
hear your guys' views on
Yeah,
that.
answer.
I honestly, my grades were horrible. I failed classes, and my story is pretty out there, it's pretty public. But when I was an undergrad at Queens College, I went to Queens College, a Division II school in CUNY.
Yeah.
And I failed classes. I majored in mathematics, and I failed linear algebra. I had to take it over again. I was good with numbers, but I wasn't understanding the material at the time. So I failed a few classes, and I had to graduate. I had to graduate early because if I didn't, I would have gotten kicked out of Queens College. It was one of those, you failed two classes in the fall. By the spring semester, you need to get out of here. And
Yeah.
from my perspective is it was, you know what? I'm going to get out of here, but I can't leave here empty-handed. I gotta leave with something. So I left with I graduated with my degree, and I knew with my grades, it was a 2.9, but that fall semester was like a zero point 0.4 or zero point 0.3. It's zero point. I need to look at my transcript, but it was horrible. And I knew I wasn't able to qualify to go into these Ivy League schools. It's funny because when I was interviewing for an internship in JP Morgan, the interviewer was like, you have lofty goals of being an investment banker, but we take students from NYU Stern, from Columbia Business School, from Penn Wharton, from HBS at Harvard. And I'm like, this is not gonna work out for me. So I knew if I can leave here with something with a degree, and I was confident that I can make it work with my master's degree at Brooklyn College or my doctorate degree at Felician University in New Jersey. I
Yeah.
knew that I can still navigate my way and be here at NYU or be at Columbia University or teach at Dartmouth. I knew that with what I have, I will be fine regardless. And I think that was the Brooklyn in me in terms of being
Yeah.
confident and making sure that I can still make my way in academia or in the industry.
For me, my sister was the smart one. She went to Yale. She's 2 years older than me. So I didn't know that about you, Dr. E. So I actually had like a 2.67 at VCU when I graduated. And my dad, it was interesting, Ishak. I thought you would say you ended up going into finance because my dad he has a PhD in finance and economics. And he was like, why I graduated with a bachelor's in psychology. And he's like, what the hell are you going to do with the psychology degree? And I was like, well, I like people. I like to study people. I've always been fascinated. And he's like, what are you going to do with that? So he's like, come to Louisiana where my parents lived. And he's like, apply to like LSU and these schools and try to get your master's in business. And I took an accounting class and a macro or microeconomics, one of them, and I was terrible at it. And I just was like, this isn't for me. And I feel like when you force something that isn't for you, for whether it's
Yeah.
for the name or the prestige or whatever, it doesn't end up working out, right? I ended up studying something called industrial organizational psychology, which is essentially just like the psychology of the workplace. And then I got my master's in it and my PhD, and I went to a small school, Hofstra, on Long Island. And I felt like that was what was I don't know how I would have done at Yale. I wasn't a school person. I like to I came from a strict upbringing, so I was just partying and just meeting people and I wasn't like focused. So I don't think you necessarily need that, but I love to see young, especially Black people going to these schools, but I don't think you necessarily need those things to be successful. But I recognize how if you have Harvard or any of these on your resume, people do look at you differently. People
Yeah.
do, more doors can open, but I actually would argue that someone might disagree with me. I would say more doors open based on who you know and who you've networked with
Yeah.
is just solely what's on your resume.
I agree 100%. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you guys said 100%. I think at this age, though you're never too old to kind of go back to school. It's like I like to learn doing things. I rather try something, try to build something, invest in and things like that. So to your point, how do I stay up to date? Is like saying the words, try to read books. A lot of audiobooks now because I'm traveling more. So and then just get on different sites and kind of learn, right? So right now, trying to learn AI, trying to learn Claude, like doing things like that, trying to be active on my feet in my spare time. I think once you're a learner, you're always an active learner, right? I have a phenomenal wife too, who, we have great communication. She tells me about things that she's learning and things that she's doing that I think we kind of challenge each other to improve and whatnot as well. So, also the community. Right? I have friends that went to these Ivy League schools that's in my network and really good friends. So we have, these educational type of discussions with clients as well. So I think I'm always getting information and things that, to your point, feel natural to me. I was like, okay, let me learn more about this. Let me see how I can kind of get involved in this. And that's currently where I'm at, I guess, in my life these days.
I was wondering, in terms of like superpowers that people have, I think everyone have a superpower or everyone have a gift that they tend to utilize to get them through, whether it's an obstacle or an objective that they have. Do you think that you have a superpower that or a gift that no one else have in your teams, and no one can evoke that but you in terms of getting through a particular task or an objective?
I don't think so. And maybe you gotta ask people on my team that versus me. Like even kind of going back to my college days with my teammates, like one of probably something I wish I could have done more was communicate to them, my experiences and why I was so focused on academics, try to get some of my teammates, to be more involved. I remember I tried with one teammate, he's like, everyone doesn't think like you, like he just haven't had the experiences enough to understand where I was. He was kind of just living here today when I was like, hey, I'm thinking about 10 years from now, But I don't know if I have a superpower. I think um confident in who I am. I don't think it's anything different, what I'm doing that someone else can do. I think a lot of people can do it. A lot of people might not intentionally want to do it. Just take the time and stuff like that and just put the work in. Ask, one of a partner I'm really close with, it's like, hey, how did you get to become a partner? And he said, Ishaq, I'll tell you a secret. So what's the secret? So I've read. It's like, huh? People don't read. People don't, they get the guidance, they don't read it. The information is there. A lot of times people want the shortcut, the short answers. Say you got to do the work. But I think it's just making sure you're going to do what is needed to be done to make sure that you are successful. And I don't know if that's a superpower. I think anyone can do it. It's just that how many people really want to do or really will do it. And I think that's maybe why I separate myself the most.
A question I was gonna ask you is what skill has carried you this far in your life? But it sounds like from what you said, maybe your ability to work hard. Because like you said, people want to take the shortcut and people want to um, I think we see it in society, and this is no shade at all to anyone who like uses, for example, like a GLP-1. I think people don't want to have to slave away in the gym or have to exercise or have to eat well when there's something that can help you minimize your appetite so that you can lose weight quickly. We're in a microwave society, so people don't want to necessarily work hard. They don't want to read, like you said, they want AI to summarize it for them. But I it sounds like from what you said, maybe the skill that has brought you so far is your ability to work hard, especially in the midst of or in a time when people don't want to work hard.
I would say this. I think if I kind of had to say one thing, it was to be able to see value and see what is needed. Right. And I'll bring you back to my college days. I played point guard, shooting guard. I even played power forward at a point in time throughout my 4 years, tenure there. And undersized and everything. And someone's like, how do you always end up on the floor? So I was always able to assess what does the team need and what is needed and say, hey, coach, I'll do that. So one time we didn't have people that's going to set good screens up. So set the best screens. I want to make sure that every time I send a screen was the best screen. So it's one of the things really assessing the situation, understanding what is needed, what values kind of need to be brought, and then being able to go there and execute it. So that was kind of that's what I remember I had teammates and he was like really talented player. He's like, yeah, I can't play. I said, the coach wants you to play defense. You're so worried about offense. If you just go there and say, coach, I'm gonna go be the best defender, you get from 10 minutes to 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And then when you do in that 20 minutes, you can get more opportunities on offense to be able to do what you want to do. But you need to put the first thing first. As he wants you to play defense, you need to be committed to that role. And a similar thing in corporate America is saying, hey, you joined in a team, right? Somebody have isolation, somebody might good at this thing. What is the weak spot here? Can you identify that by yourself? And then you start bringing your value there. You start doing the things that nobody wants to do. Someone once told me, he's like, hey, how do you get promoted earlier? So how you become, expendable to your leader? Ask them, what do they hate doing? And you go do that and you be perfect at it. You be the best at that. Because one thing they always keep you because they know you're going to do this thing that they hate doing. All right. So understanding those type of things, those little things, I think is, that's allowed me to have a decent career or be around and, these companies and do these type of things that I've been able to do.
I'm also curious about in your role right now, like how are you AI proofing your job? Because a lot of the jobs that we're doing, in the
Yeah.
classroom, a lot of professors lean on AI to like grade or create lesson plans. Students are using AI to write papers. So are there things that you're doing to sort of like AI proof your job or the roles that you're doing within your job?
Yeah, I think to your point, the larger kind of conversations, what kind of governance structure do you have?
Mhm.
I think more so like AI is here and we need to embrace it, right? So we need to use it. But how do you have it kind of supplement it, not just rely totally on it? So do you have the right governance, the right controls kind of around it, and making sure that hey, you're putting those systems or processes in place where someone's not going to give you a product and you're going to be on LinkedIn or the news saying, hey, XYZ company, got this whole AI thing and then change it, right? So make sure you have people reviewing it, make sure people reading it, like have them help in certain aspects of it, but you got to take the ownership of it. And I think kind of making sure that whatever organization you're with or you're working with is that you guys have those governance around AI. I think that's very helpful in general, especially the things that what we do.
I know we have to get out of here soon, but I do have one last question for you. For aspiring, Division One athletes or aspiring consultants here, if there was one message or one advice that you would give to them um, when you did it, if you were growing up, what would be the advice or the message that you would tell an aspiring consultant or a Division One athlete that are considering whether or not they're going to stay in sports and athletics
Yeah.
or move on? What would be that one message or one piece of advice that you would give them?
I don't know. One, maybe I say a bunch of thoughts. I just throw them out there, right? I think a lot of times you want to get it perfect. You want to hit the home run on the first shot. Like it's a long life, right? So just because you might take a path doesn't work, you can always go and reinvent yourself. So don't be too discouraged from that. I think network is key, right? Network is currency. It's real. Make sure that you're networking. Make sure you're out there meeting people that doesn't only look like you. That's doing other things. You'd be surprised what that could bring. I think the key thing, kind of circling back to what I said, is value. One is understanding how to bring value to others, but understanding what value people see in you. So if you're an athlete out there, don't wait till you're done playing to start trying to network and get these alumni, stuff like that. No, while you're playing, while these people see you as valuable for them, that's when you should be having those conversations like, hey, coach, I need to meet 5 people a month that do XYZ. You know what I mean? So I can start networking while I'm in college to make sure I'm building that network, outside. Because every corporate person wants to have a personal relationship with this athlete. Like, oh, this kid, they like, all right, I know Jalen Brunson. What's her name from Special Victims, SVU, Olivia? She's the envy of all the other fans because she knows him, right? I understand that when you're at that school playing, there's value there. People see you as valuable. They want to say they know you and whatnot. So use that. Use your value at that point in time and make sure you're building connections. You're doing things that you can do to advance yourself 10 years from now. And the same other thing is that whenever you leave, making sure that you understand what is valuable to the market, right? So understand is what are these companies looking for these type of day, this type of this these days, right? So AI, we have ChatGPT, we have cloud. How do you use them, right? How can you make sure that you're kind of being able to work with these type of systems and go into a new company and be able to bring that value? A lot of the people more seasoned, even older than I am, they don't want to learn how to do these new processes. So if you can be the person that can want to learn and master it and be able to explain it, I think that kind of goes a long way.
Okay, well, I have one last question. Based
Okay.
on what you said, Ishak, what does networking look like for you? I think a lot of people struggle, whether they're students or, adults. How do you network? How do you meet people? What does that look like? How do you build those lasting relationships that can propel your career?
And I would tell actually with this, right? Because I get this question a lot. I ask them, who are your closest friends and why are they your closest friends? right? And generally, when you hear people kind of talk about that, they say, hey, people that they feel they're generally interested in them, that kind of show up, right? Consistency. People that don't just come, you feel like you're being used. When I try to meet people, I try not to act for something right away. I try to kind of generally, hey, get to know them, try to find some type of connection and follow up on that connection. How can I add to their value before I ask them for something and be genuine? But this stuff happens over time, over years and months, right? Of consistent communication. It doesn't have to be every day, it doesn't have to be every month. Maybe just quarterly, but try to create a cadence where you're kind of reaching out to them and connecting with them, trying to find common things of interest and to say, hey, how could I be of use to you? How could I be helpful to you? And sometimes just doing non-professional things and, you know, you build that relationship and they like you and they're like, okay, let me bring you to my professional world, right? So it's kind of understanding those type of things. So that's what I'll kind of say in regards to network is see how you build those genuine, friendships or relationships.
Mm, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Ishaq.
No,
It was
thank
so
you.
great to meet you and to chat with you. And yeah, Dr. E, I'll pass the mic to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ishaq. We appreciate you. This is the boardroom, and we are signing out right now.
Mind of a scholar and a business-minded soul. We at the academic boardroom, yeah, we keeping it 100. If you're looking for the truth, well, you finally found it.